Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Honourable Steve Chadwick.
Thank you. I'm only going to take a short call, mainly because sat in humility and didn't take their call, but Mr Howard will be surprised to hear me say that Labor is fully behind this bill. This bill, the Local Government Borrowing Bill, is a much better bill than the national position of Borrow and Hope bill, because this is something that is going to have concrete and tangible benefits for the local government sector. And I want to congratulate you, Minister Hyde. This is something, when I think you're going back to rates capping, you always had concerns about expenditure at the local authority level. But I do want to put on the record that with the establishment of this agency, it wasn't actually a new idea. And I do remember when the previous Prime Minister met with mayors of the country and regional council chairs, this was a decision that was actually discussed by Labor before. No, hang on a minute though. In response to that, we set up the Capital Markets Development Task Force, and they reported back to the government at the end of 2009, and we set that up in 2008 in response to a call from mayors and chairs of regional councils to look at what sort of funding mechanism that we could put into the local government sector. So it was on the back burner and moving along, and I agree with Mr Ockenville that the time then wasn't as imperative as it has become since the recession. So I wouldn't really say that this was an idea. It was one that was moved a little bit forward by the Jobs Summit led by John Key, but it was an idea that we actually instigated, and I just want to own a bit of that back, at the same time as congratulating Rodney Hyde for getting it moving, because if you think of local authority legislation, we've seen the Auckland Super City Bill, and those of us that haven't sat in the Auckland governance level have often thought what's going to come out for local authorities around the country, and I think that this mechanism is a fantastic idea because it will get the Kiwi investors excited about investing back into something that perhaps they will actually be able to say we had a part in that investment and a part in that development, and we much prefer it to other proposals that were floated a little bit earlier. So it's a win-win for everybody. The community will love it. I like the 25 million savings. Of course we can borrow more cheaply from an infrastructure and a bank like this to help meet local authorities. And I do want to also put on record, and I come from Rotorua, and we have got all but one of our lakes with a sewage subsidy scheme that is helping reticulation and treatment of lakes water in Rotorua. And unfortunately, the subsidised scheme from the Ministry of Health has finished, and there is no more funding, and we have one lake, Lake Tarawera. So I'm going to encourage, when this bill is through, that our local authority puts its hand up to this new agency to say we know exactly what it costs to get a good reticulated sewage scheme there to protect the lake's water, and we'll put our dibs in, and then we'll really test the effectiveness of this authority to make sure that everybody around New Zealand, every local authority can get access to it, that it won't all go to the higher needs of Canterbury region at the moment, or all get eaten up by Auckland and the super city, because there are infrastructure needs all around the country. And I think it's shameful that wonderful little drinking water subsidy schemes and sewage subsidy schemes run by the Ministry of Health have now been canned, and that's a public health issue which I think is going to have long-term detrimental effects on the public health and well-being. I do also want to acknowledge the death today of Mayor Don Hammond, who was the Mayor of Whakatane District Council, and I remember Mayor Hammond taking me out to a very deprived community, Te Whaiti, who were looking at managing a waste mountain that actually leachate into the streams where trout fishermen just a kilometre away were catching prize trout. And he was concerned about the health impacts on people from this waste leachate. If only there was a scheme like this, because Te Whāiti was a community that no way could afford to raise the rates of the people of Te Whāiti, where there were only something like 40 residents. So in acknowledgement to Don Hammond's contribution to Whakatane and that wider region, I think it's very fitting that today we are debating this bill, and I think he will be really thrilled to see that there is at last something that he put before the Prime Minister of the country in about 2004 has now got a mechanism for those small deprived communities to actually access. There is one little element of cynicism, and that was when this government came in and talked about a brighter future. Well, no, I've got a bit to say. This is a short speech.
10 short minutes.
When we got into government, Rodney Hyde was harping on about local authority spending and debt being out of control. And in Rodney Hyde's last act before the House, I do want to get it on the record that actually the Auditor General looked at local government and showed that debt was increasing. It wasn't increasing nearly as fast as Rodney Hyde pumped it up to be as he tried to introduce a rates capping bill, which was a little bit like this government's approach to ACC, saying it was out of control, therefore we'll privatise it. In fact, in June 2010, the councils had borrowings of $1.9 billion, as did city councils, and that was less than the $347 million for district councils and $136 for city councils. Point being, they racked up the exercise in order to look at privatisation of community assets, and we would never have supported that. So it is lovely to be in the House today to be able to say Labor fulsomely supports this bill, and I think it's fitting for Rodney Hyde. He'll go out on a high.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Local Government Borrowing Bill, second reading.
This bill is set down for committee stage next sitting day. Call now on Government Order of the Day number